After days of all but complete internet shutdown and accusations they'd killed hundreds of protesters, Iranian authorities called for a nationwide rally of support and began broadcasting the only footage they want to be seen. Not the violence at the hands of their own forces, but live footage of crowds at funeral processions, deaths they blame on, quote, terrorist actions led by the US and Israel.
عوامل مسلح در بین تظاهرکنندگان مشاهده شدند که به سمت نیروهای
Armed elements were observed among the protesters who shoot not only at our security forces, at the police, but more importantly, we realize that they also shoot at ordinary people.
بلکه به مردم عادی هم شلیک میکنند.
But it's the clerical regime's violent crackdown on street protests that have drawn a wave of condemnation globally, with Germany and Canada today calling for an end to its repression. According to the human rights activist news agency, the death toll has now exceeded 500, including 48 security personnel, with more than 10,000 arrests in 2 weeks. In his latest geopolitical missive from Air Force One, and a week after threatening intervention, President Trump said the Iranian regime was approaching his red line.
There seem to be some people killed that aren't supposed to be killed. These are violent, if you call them leaders, I don't know if they're leaders or just they rule through violence. But we're looking at it very seriously. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options. We'll make a determination.
Tomorrow he'll be briefed by aides on a raft of response options, said to be ranging from targeted strikes to cyber attacks. Trump also said he'd contact his sometime friend, sometime foe, Elon Musk, to discuss restoring the internet by sending more Starlink satellite terminals, which bypass Iran's domestic infrastructure. Seen as a vital tool for protesters, the regime is currently jamming existing terminals.
We may get the internet going, if that's possible. We may speak to Elon, because as you know, he's very good at that kind of thing. He's got a very good company. So we may speak to Elon Musk. And in fact, I'm going to call him as soon as I'm finished with you.
The uprising began a fortnight ago after shopkeepers in Tehran's Grand Bazaar staged a strike as the rial hit a record low of 1.4 million against the dollar. Protests over rocketing inflation, worsening living conditions and regime repression soon spread to all 31 provinces, rights groups say, with a much wider reach both geographically and demographically than previous protest movements. Iran's leadership has been quick to cast the hand of America in the unrest, accusing protesters of colluding with Trump and saying it'll strike back in the event of intervention. At a time of unprecedented domestic and external pressure, its clerical rulers' grip on communications is key, and it's using them for one narrative alone, broadcasting pro-regime protests, just as the relatives of those they're accused of killing say they're banned from holding funerals. Joining me now is Ben Taleblu, who's a Middle East analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Iran program. Thank you for joining us. Iran has said it will retaliate to any intervention from the US that it doesn't want but is ready for war. What could a direct conflict look like in this scenario?
Well, in so many ways, there is a direct conflict because there's a war of wills between President Trump at the moment and Iran's supreme leader. They're both trying to get the other to swerve. The US president is trying to stop the crackdown against Iranian protesters, and Iran's supreme leader is trying to essentially continue the crackdown while also trying to prevent American intervention, particularly military intervention. Lest we forget, day 15, day 16 of these nationwide anti-regime uprisings comes against the backdrop of the 12-day war and the year of economic and environmental really defeats of the Islamic Republic that rendered bare how weak it is. So make no mistake, the regime is trying to avoid a war. There's even reports that at the same time, they're trying to somehow come to some kind of secret negotiation with the US as they continue to crack down at home, while all the talk is about what a potential conflict could look like. And again, the 12-day war is one scenario. The president hasn't been stressing that this is going to be something kinetic. And within a day from now, we'll be having a major meeting with national security officials to determine what options he has. But make no mistake, this is one where, as he likes to say, he has all the cards here. So he has diplomatic options, political options, intelligence options, military options, economic options, and he seems to have the world right where he wants them, which is all eyes on him.
As you say, at that meeting tomorrow, what options do you think will be discussed?
No doubt, I think the internet in Iran will, at a bare minimum, be discussed, trying to find ways to stop the Islamic Republic's jamming of the internet, throttling of the internet, as well as, of course, potentially ways to provide communication support to Iranians. That has long been a bipartisan feature of U.S. Foreign policy towards Iran. But given the fact that the regime has been killing scores, if not hundreds, if not thousands, much more likely, of Iranians under the past 4 days of an internet blackout, there's going to have to be a much more serious conversation about what to do, whether that's military enforcement of the red line or potentially from the cyber side, trying to blind the regime's command and control, trying to thwart their ability to move against protesters or coordinate or organize against protesters. Late in the 12-day war, the Israelis potentially may have given a blueprint to the Trump administration because they began to go after IRGC bases. Potentially that might be an option for the Trump administration. But it really is anybody's guess here. The real concern here, though, is given the number of times the president has said that he will hold this regime accountable for cracking down on protesters, and then the sudden about face and reference to potentially negotiating with Iran, that I think would be both a strategic and a moral own goal for Washington at this time, particularly as it has elevated protester expectations by, over the past few days, putting wind beneath their wings.
And given what we've seen in Venezuela and given the situation in Iran and the grip that the regime has over its institutions, how likely do you think regime change is?
The Iranian people didn't come out to change the exchange rate. They came out to change their regime. Fundamentally, when they were denied a pathway at the ballot box, they sought other ways to try to be in charge of their political destiny. So, what we're seeing inside Iran right now is the latest installation of an 8 or 9 year national uprising that really has posed now the most, I would say, potent threat both to the legitimacy and to the durability of the Islamic Republic in the past 46 years. And frankly, I have to say that is something from a kind of security and strategy perspective that the West cannot be indifferent to. You know, this is not charity or missionary work. This is basically the most pro-American street protesting against the most anti-American state in one of the pretty troubled and hostile parts of the world. So how Washington chooses to rack and stack its interests here, both morally, politically, and strategically, remains to be seen. But really, all eyes are on really the brave Iranian protesters and how they will respond to Washington's, attempt to live up to its red line or attempt to de-escalate the situation.
And where do the protests stand this morning? Human rights groups are saying the death toll has surpassed 500. The Iranian foreign minister has said everything's under control. What do you think is going to happen next?
Some of the imagery they've been showing on state media, some of the stories they've been running on state media of cities being totally fine, totally quiet, do not jive at all with the messages that we've been seeing on social media, the imagery and the video, the body bags that have been coming out. Iranians have been writing in the limited moments that they do have internet access restored during the day or are able to use the national intranet and then to message with others to get a message out, that the regime has been power washing blood off of the streets. That's how bad the crackdown has been at night. So while there are 500 plus confirmed, the death toll is almost definitely in the thousands.
You mentioned the internet connection, the role of the internet earlier. Trump has a checkered relationship with Elon Musk, but he said he's going to approach him to ask about Starlink and whether that could be further established over Iran to bypass its domestic capabilities. How important is internet connection in all of this, and how much of a game changer would that be?
Well, Starlink is already active in Iran, but it's been there in dribs and drabs in some human rights organizations versus some Iranians who've gone abroad to be able to bring it back in. So it's not that Starlink is not present. It's not present at scale, and it's not present at a scale that could operate, given the fact that there are user fees and licenses that could jive with existing US policy on Iran. But let me just say this, that is something you provide Iranians, knowing the history of the contest between the state and the street, knowing that that is an unfair media and communications environment from the state against the street. That is something you provide them when there are not thousands being killed. That is something that you provide them when there are not protests for entering its third week now. When the state has turned the guns against the people, you really do have to step up your policy. So conversations about internet, about Starlink, about VPNs are necessary, but they are not sufficient at this point. And they would signal to me, if that becomes the bulk of the conversation in this important national security meeting on Tuesday, that Washington would again be behind the curve.
And Ben Talabi, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.